In today's video, I wanted to show you how to build your own OpenVPN server. OpenVPN, if you're not aware, is basically a framework that allows you to connect to a server remotely and will allow you to build a tunnel between your client device and the server, and your communication between you and that server is completely encrypted. This is useful if you're on a public Wi-Fi hotspot, for example, or if you simply wanted to access internal network resources. Say you're a sysadmin and you want to access some server remotely. To access it securely, one way is to simply just open up a VPN server. So to get started, I'm going to be using Amazon Web Services, and specifically their Lightsail service, to quickly deploy a generic Ubuntu server, and we'll go from there. So if we go here and we create our instance, I'm going to be using Virginia. You can choose from a wide range of different regions, but I'm closest to Virginia, so that's what I'm going to choose. Next, we'll be choosing Ubuntu. Make sure to choose the latest version. And then we are going to create an SSH key pair so we can manage it remotely. So we are going to create a new SSH key pair, and I'm going to call this demo key pair. Okay. And we're going to generate the key. Note that you can only download this file once, so keep it in a secure location. For right now, since this is a temporary thing, I'm just going to save it in my downloads folder. Next, you can choose your plan. The reason why I'm using Amazon Web Services over DigitalOcean or Microsoft Azure or any other cloud hosting platform is specifically because of the pricing. I know there are cheaper places out there, but this to me provides the most convenience because I am a regular Amazon Web Services user. So if you're going to be connecting and only you and a couple other people are going to be connecting and you don't plan to expand further, then this basic $3.50 a month is going to work perfectly for you. Just be aware that your data transfer is going to be capped off at 1 terabyte. Next, we're going to create a unique name for our Ubuntu server. So I'm going to call it demo. You can call it whatever. I'm going to call it demo Ubuntu. And now we're going to create our instance. It does take like a minute or two to actually spin up. You'll see it says not available yet. So in the meantime, we'll set up our demo key pair to actually work. So we can SSH into it in just a couple minutes. So first things first, we're going to want to move the key pair from the downloads folder, which is where I had it saved, to the .ssh directory, which is where SSH keys are stored in macOS. So I'm going to access the terminal, and I'm simply going to I'm actually going to change this right here. So it's called demo key pair.pem. And I'm simply going to copy this and paste it. And now it's moved to the .ssh folder. I'm also, for security reasons, going to change the access rights so that only I can access it, only I can read and write it. Nobody else can. So I'm going to use this command to do that. Okay. So now that we have that, I am going to SSH into it. Before we SSH into it, let me just make sure that it actually has. Okay, yes. So it actually is now spun up, and I have a public IP here, although I would like to start a static IP address. Here's the thing with EC2 instances on Amazon Web Services. As soon as you power them down, they will actually release that IP address and you will be assigned a new one. That will be problematic for your OpenVPN server unless you use some sort of domain and then change your A record to point to the instance every time the IP address changes. So to avoid all of that, you just assign a static IP address to it. I'm going to call it demo static IP. Okay, and now I have a public static IP address here. This is actually very important because we are going to SSH into it. So if you look at the details here, we have the public IP address here, and then our default username is simply Ubuntu. So I'm going to modify that right over here, and we're going to change this to Ubuntu and the public IP address to this. And now all I have to do is hit yes, and now I'm in. So now we actually have to install OpenVPN. So on GitHub, there is this really nice install script made available by Angristan. I'll leave a link in the description for you to use this. And it essentially just allows you to paste this in and download the file. And then from there, all you have to do is, hold on, I'll show you. So it's downloaded this file right here. And now all you have to do is execute the file. So you just have to run this. And it essentially will go through a series of questions asking you for certain setup requirements. So first it's going to ask for your IP address. We assigned a static public IP address here. So that's all we have to put in here. And I'm not going to configure IPv6. I'll use the default 1194, and UDP is faster. So this is important to note. If you are trying to bypass some internet filtering system that's only allowing connections through certain ports, you will probably want to change to a custom port 443, for example, and use TCP, which will make it seem like HTTPS traffic, although this isn't foolproof. I'll make another demo a little bit later that'll show how to configure stunnel and make your traffic look like legitimate HTTPS traffic. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to be using UDP port 1194. And I'm going to go with the default Cloudflare. They're pretty reliable. So this is actually pretty interesting. So the compression. So it asks if you want compression, and actually there is a like an exploit that some people use to be able to figure out what type of traffic was going through an OpenVPN tunnel by looking at how compressible it was. This is an edge case, and it's not very common at all. So in most cases, you can go along with no compression. That's what I'm going to go with. But if you want, you can enable it. So the normal encryption standard for this script is actually AES 128-bit, but I like to go a bit higher and use 256. And in case you didn't know, GCM is slightly more sophisticated and doesn't require is I guess you could say more secure than CBC. So I'm going to go with option 3 here, and I'm going to accept the defaults for everything else. And now that all of that is done, it's going to go out and fetch all of the things that will be required to build an OpenVPN server. You could do all of this by hand, but it's going to take a while and it's going to be pretty difficult. This is super, super convenient. This is essentially just asking if it can restart services and automatically update things. Obviously, for me, being a security freak, I'm going to say yes. You don't have to, though. So now here comes the easier part. All you have to do now is make a client, and I'm just going to call this client. Okay. And for right now, I'm just going to go passwordless, and now an OpenVPN file, client configuration file has been created. So if I show you, we have the OpenVPN install shell right over here, but then we also have this client.ovpn file here. This will be crucial for setting up your client device. You won't be able to connect without it. So we need to copy that configuration file from the server to our computers. So I'm going to actually exit out of here. And before I do this, well, I could do this first, but before I do this, you're not going to be able to connect unless you allow port 1194. So we're using UDP in this case, so I'm going to configure port 1194. I'm not going to be using port 80 at all, so I'm going to allow that. So now the next step is to actually copy the file, the OpenVPN file, from the server to your device. So I'm actually going to CD into my downloads directory, and now I'm in my downloads directory, and the next part is to SCP this. So using this demo key pair that we had moved before, I'm going to simply change this to my configuration. And basically this will copy the file, and with this dot at the end, it actually will it will retain the client.ovpn name. If you had replaced it with something else, it would rename that file when it's moved on your local device. So now all I have to do is copy this file, open the terminal, and paste. And now it's downloaded. So I'm going to go, I'm going to actually show you my public IP address. I'm using a VPN already, so if I go here, this is my public VPN IP address that I already have running, but I'm going to connect to my other VPN that we just configured, and we're going to see what happens. So I'm going to open Finder, and oh, wrong app. And I'm going to go to my downloads folder and find the client file. So here it is. I'm going to import it. I use Viscosity as my OpenVPN client. This is a paid thing. It pays. It's a one-time fee of $14. I figured because I'm using VPNs a lot more now, I'm going off to a four-year university, and I need access to my internal home network. I'm going to be using this a lot. So you can get a free one for if you're using macOS. I would recommend TunnelBlick if you're looking for free, but viscosity is really, really, really great, and it's really configurable. But if we go here and we see this, I'm going to disconnect. That's my already existing. That IP address that you saw before was actually my already existing one that I had created before. So I'm actually going to connect to here now. And I'm connected. If we look here, this is the public IP address, right? If I go to Google right now and I search what is my IP, there we go. It's the IP address that's over here. So I have configured the OpenVPN. The next step is some general housekeeping things. So I'm actually going to SSH back into my server, and we need to configure a firewall. So as you saw, I did configure the firewall on Amazon Web Services, but now we need to close some things, and I'll show you what I mean. So the one I'm using is uncomplicated firewall, or UFW. So if we look right now, sudo UFW status, it's inactive. But if I do sudo UFW allow SSH, and then sudo UFW enable, and hit yes, now it's active. And if I show you sudo UFW status verbose, now I'm only allowing port 22 TCP. Okay, I'm going to exit out of here, and you would think that my VPN would now break, right? I connect back, and it still works. How does that work? So I am not completely sure why it works, but the port to the general public looks like it's closed. But to actually connect to the OpenVPN server, it actually allows connection still. So if I do a port scanner, and let me copy this public IP address. Okay. And let's use what is my IP. For this public IP address and do port 1194, it appears to be closed. And you can use pretty much any port scanner, and I'll show this. The next thing I would do is go to your firewall and change this. You won't need SSH until you need to add or remove a user. Actually, that reminds me. Let me show you how to add or remove a user. So if I copy this command again and go here, I can simply execute this file again, the one that we used to actually install OpenVPN. And it now asks if we would, it detects that we have OpenVPN already installed, and we can simply add a new user, revoke an existing user, uninstall OpenVPN completely, or just exit. I'm going to exit, and it's a simple process. Oops. So the final thing I would do is just disable SSH from Amazon Web Services end, so that only when you need to access SSH, you would have to go into here and enable that. And to oops. Okay. So yeah, that's how you configure OpenVPN on a VPS. Now, this is the same setup you would use if you had a home server. I actually do have a home server that runs OpenVPN so that I can access the internal network. And yeah, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks.